Having one of the longest ranges of a melee weapon in Diablo 2, spears have a rather interesting history in the game, at one point being the go-to weapon for barbarians, at other times being considered mostly worthless. In the modern Diablo 2 Resurrected, they actually do have a place, both on players and mercenaries, so today we're going to take a look at the unique spears of Diablo 2, the good, the bad, and just the plain weird. Before we jump in, if you are looking for the Amazon exclusive spears, they are part of the Amazon Uniques video you can find linked in both the card up top as well as in the description down below, with the points of mainly keeping them separate since only a single class can use them, and if you're looking for all the other uniques, stay tuned to the channel because we will be hitting them as well, if we haven't already gotten to the one you want to see when you stumble across this. Anyways, starting out at the bottom, we have Dragon Chang, a weapon most people never really see or use because it falls into the weird category a lot of low-level uniques do, where they require farming oddly low-level areas to increase their drop rate. As far as stats go, it's really not impressive enough to justify doing that, just in the first place. With okay damage for level 8, but that quickly gets outclassed as soon as you get to Act 2 and normal by magic and rare items that can provide way similar buffs and a lot more damage. Next we have Resurrected, a fairly well-recognized spear for equipping on low-level mercenaries. Resurrected has reasonably decent mods with increased attack speed and plus stats, not to mention reduced enemy defense, helping your mercenary hit more often. The thing Resurrected is most well known for though is one of the early introductions to the slow target effect, which does just what it says. It slows enemies struck by the weapon. The only major drawback of this weapon is its damage output, which, like the Dragon Chang, is good for its level requirement, but is quickly outclassed by bigger weapons, though this at least has other mods that can keep its worth up a little bit. Next we have Blood Thief, a reasonable mercenary weapon for early on that can be okay if you're playing a spear build yourself. Packing open wounds and strength, it has okay uses. It even packs a bit of life leech and a bit more damage boost than lower spears. Only downside is that life leech at this low level, while useful, won't do much more than a few points here or there due to the low damage you'll be doing with weapons of this tier. I like it for early mercenary weapons, but beyond that, it usually just sits collecting dust in favor of bigger spears or polearms. Lance of Yagai, though, is an interesting spear for me, and yes, I do have to say it that way. At first glance, it may seem mundane, but early on, it actually brings a lot to the table for a level 22 requirement weapon. It's got about as much damage as other spears in the raw physical damage sense, without any plus damage modifiers, but it also packs a 40% increased attack speed and a decent punch of lightning damage to help it actually reach reasonable average damage output for how early you'd get it. All of this with a bonus perk of Resist All to make up for the lack of a shield makes it a pretty sweet deal for normal, though unfortunately it also means it does not upgrade well. The last normal difficulty spear is one that you can actually use in Nightmare difficulty due to its raw damage, and that is the Gore Rod, with reasonable enhanced damage percent on top of a solid base damage, along with packing on fairly decent fire damage on top of that. Mercenaries in particular, or even jab-based Amazons, can get some reasonable damage out of this. Yes, it's slower than the other spears, but it's got a good deal of punch to back it up, and a Shell Rune can help that out a lot for a cheap bump up. Gore Rod can also help your mercenary's survival against Diablo, Mega Demons, and the Council, thanks to its fire resist bump. Is it going to last you all the way through hell? No, but it can work through most of Nightmare. Into the exceptional list, we start with the Impaler, a spear very much intended to be used with, well, impale, packing reasonable damage for its speed, some useful hit chance buffs, a chance of open wounds, along with +2 impale and power strike for an Amazon. This can actually tide the spear Amazon over through Nightmare if you don't find something more utilitarian. And with the changes coming in 2.4, this item's usefulness may actually increase for the players making their way through the game with this easier to find gear. Next we have Resurrected's big brother, the Kelpie Snare, a fairly decent mercenary weapon thanks to the massive slow target effect on it, basically turning your mercenary into a tool for locking down various bosses and such, basically by slowing them down to a literal crawl. On top of that, it does okay damage for the level, gives some plus stats in life, as well as packing in a pretty large fire resist buff should your mercenary need it. It definitely falls in on my underappreciated uniques list, even though it's not really ever best in slot. It doesn't hurt that it looks kind of cool in Diablo 2 Resurrected, and that it is actually somewhat functional for a number of builds. The next one, however, Solfestine, has always felt a bit underwhelming to me, mainly because it falls into a similar category as Blood Thief. It's an okay damage weapon with leech. That said, Solfestine does the job a bit better, thanks to actually having reasonable damage, and the fact that it's dual leech rather than just life leech, meaning it can be used in conjunction with various skills effectively, like Fend or Jab, while still keeping your mana topped off. The weapon overall, though, just kind of feels mediocre to use. A not so mediocre weapon is one that actually is one of the best mercenary weapons in the game, and that is the Honsudan Yari. This weapon falls into the category of socket uniques that I absolutely love, but they very rarely get good treatment. But it does it in an exceptional way. With solid damage, 45% crushing blow, and auto repair, even in the non-ethereal version it's a solid weapon for both player and mercenary, but if you find a high percent ethereal one, it can be upgraded and turned into an exceptionally powerful standalone weapon for any spear wielder, thanks to its high base damage potential and 3 sockets that allow you to shape the weapon into whatever you want. Do you need speed? You get shales. Do you need leech? You get an am. There's even people with resources to burn that have put bear runes in it, though I'd personally avoid that. There's better uses for bear runes. And with that auto repair, the ethereal ones are not mercenary exclusives or Zod fodder, so you can use them to make some seriously fun builds. The last of the exceptionals is Spire of Honor, a spear that has always felt weird to me with its boost to combat skills for Paladin. It's almost like they wanted to make spear zealots or spear chargers a thing and forgot about it. This weapon does lean into that second concept a bit since it packs attack rating bonuses and damage bonuses to demons, as well as some defensive perks to try and wean you off the shield of a Paladin that the Paladin always uses, with off-armor enhanced defense and faster hit recovery being quite useful. I think this would be seen more of use if it had resist, but it's still not a bad spear, it just doesn't quite compete with the flexibility of things like Honsudan. And finally we move into the elite spears, starting with Asheks Needle, which no, is not always ethereal. This is just the first one I grabbed for my Go Mule, but it is the one I kept with a purpose, since this spear is another quite good mercenary weapon. Not only does it have increased attack speed, decent damage, ignore target defense, a trickle of poison damage, and deadly strike to pump up your damage per second, it also has variable plus to all skills. And the all skills part is important, since yes, that plus skill also applies to your mercenary's aura and jab skill, giving them a little extra utility if what you need from them is for that specific aura to be reasonably stronger. On a low roll, this isn't very noticeable, but for all skills to a might aura is an extra 40% enhanced damage, which if you don't have a much more expensive pride to take its place, is not half bad. Next is Viper Fork, a spear I keep wanting to use but never really seem to get around to. For the most part, it's not that special, with really good increased attack speed and decent enough enhanced damage, and some poison related perks. Part of me wants to see if I can get that level 9 poison explosion on striking to do something useful. While I know it never will, I'm always intrigued by corpse utility setups. Whether it's returning from killing or rest in peace effects, this weapon is just an example of an extremely unique weapon effect that has always kind of sat in the background forgotten. And last up is a weapon that has kind of suffered from its own stats, Steel Pillar, which unfortunately is indestructible, which means it will never spawn ethereal and be a dangerous elite weapon. That said, it does have decent stats, with reasonable damage, a bit of increased attack speed, crushing blow. It can do okay damage, though I'd usually favor a Honsudan or Obedience over this due to much greater flexibility. But it is also worth noting, if you're aiming for defense tanking, this can actually be a fun weapon with its 80% off armor enhanced defense, which basically makes it like an automatic low-level defiance for your character.